When it was just rumours, I couldn't for the life of me understand why Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag might need a remake. Even today, it's not a bad looking game. It doesn't necessarily look like the newest thing to hit the shelves anymore. I find it to still look reasonably modern. But Ubisoft, in a bout of creative inspiration, have in fact been remaking Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag from the ground up, and now they've announced it. It's called Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, omitting the 4 because numbers aren't no longer cool. And since I don't identify with the remasters and remakes or inherently bastardizations crowd, even if I do understand where they're coming from, I have to give Ubisoft props on this one because it looks impressive. Black Flag is a game I have a lot of love for. I find the original version to be flawed, but tells a fantastic story. The story of Edward Kenway. So naturally, my concern, hearing the rumours that have at this point been going around for years now, was that a remake or remaster of this game would be RPGified, to bring it in line with more recent Ubisoft titles. So that was the first concern that Ubisoft put to bed. This ground-up remake would not in fact be an RPG. Instead, it seems they've gone for a faithful recreation of Assassin's Creed 4, albeit with the latest version of the Anvil engine, supposedly expanding the narrative in certain areas to give the game some more flesh. There's fresh content, we don't have the multiplayer unfortunately, and there won't be any DLCs, sorry Adewale. I wouldn't pretend I wanted to see what Assassin's Creed PvP multiplayer looks like on the latest Anvil engine anyway, but the DLC I am certainly surprised about. However, I can't knock the priorities. If you're going to remake Assassin's Creed 4, the base game is obviously the most important bit, and watching the premiere I get the impression they're confident about it. They didn't shy away from acknowledging the original Black Flag's weak spots, and didn't just vomit out a cinematic trailer for a game we played 13 years ago. We got a beefy showcase so we can know exactly what to expect when this game releases in less than 3 months' time. Yes, they'll be charging £50 for the thing, which, while it isn't full AAA price, is still not a negligible sum. But for once, watching a contemporary Ubisoft showcase, I didn't get that air of shameless money grabbing. Make no mistake, I'm sure one of the main motivators for the company is money, but that within itself is not exactly offensive. And Ubisoft themselves have proved in the past there are more efficient ways to sap people of their money than remaking a beloved title, and not only that, expanding it. Furthermore, business-wise, Ubisoft still appear to be in a ditch that is on fire. I get the distinct impression they don't have the margins to cock this up. Money is absolutely an integral motivator, but if the product is something the consumer will be happy with, and the response to this remake announcement appears to be quite positive so far, then how evil can that be? So, while there are certain things I can point to and say I'm not so keen on in the Black Flag Resynced premiere, the overall impression I got is this is an earnest attempt to prove that Ubisoft can still make the likes of Black Flag, which, to be fair, would be nice. And that is ultimately why I'm making this video. I don't want to treat Ubisoft like this bogey company, and maybe I can bring more value being involved in the discussion than removed from it. So I thought I'd highlight for you what I liked about the showcase and what I perhaps did not. The first thing I really like is the confirmation that this remake's existence will not result in original Black Flag disappearing from digital stores only to become a phantom they talk about in the CEX staff room. That to me is typically a good sign. Even if it means less people will play that edition going forwards, it is important that players still have that option. Secondly, visuals. When it comes to scenery, Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, from what we've seen, looks pretty damn good. The lighting is really nice. The environments look pretty dense, which is a flat area in more recent Assassin's Creed titles, and while nice visuals are not the be-all and end-all of any game even in today's world, if you can accomplish it, it isn't a mark against you. I can envision a compromise on art direction, but 2013 was slap bang in that awkward middle spot between technical limitations yielding art style and the prevalence of realism. That being said, the original Black Flag had a pleasant aesthetic, and why might be a casualty. Something I'm not too convinced on in this area, I would say, are the faces at times. In some shots, they don't look fantastic, yet in others they look perfectly fine. It seems they're going to be using a lot of the mocap from the 2013 version, and it seems they're doing even more of it for the extra stuff, so maybe that will be the difference, but I suspect it'll be a long time before seeing faces in a Ubisoft game doesn't activate my fight or flight response. What did in the promo footage we've seen was Stede Bonnet, whose expressions are far from the worst I've seen out of Ubisoft, but still gives me the impression he's trying hard to pass off as human, so I let my guard down, he jumps out the screen and murders me. So I will refer to the work in progress disclaimer, and we'll crack on. One thing I have seen spoken about a lot already on the likes of Twitter, or X shall we call it these days, I still call it Twitter though, I'm stubborn, is a bad comparison shot. I found a version of it that was posted by AC Landmarks, I'll leave a link in the description, and shows a side-by-side comparison of the same scene, in which it's clear the original version is more artistically complete feeling, whereas the 2026 shot prioritizes graphics, but as far as drama is concerned, it's a lot flatter. The people saying that, I agree with them, in this instance, but I'm not entirely convinced one shot looking rough is enough to convince me, against a backdrop of other shots that do look rather nice, that the art direction has been entirely sacrificed here. Don't get me wrong, I do think the scene people are making an example of needs work, but when I look at some of the other shots in this promotional content, I don't feel especially like I'm looking at a lost cause in the artistic department, though I can completely understand that if all you see of it is this, yeah, on that alone I wouldn't be convinced either. And were I still in my bad faith Twitter argument phase, I might and ah about it myself. Like I said, I expect some artistic casualty, it's kind of inevitable when the limitations of 2013 no longer apply, but at the same time I don't think any one shot is going to be entirely indicative of how this shakes out, especially when there are examples that appear to swing in the other direction. So I found this cutscene in the showcase and compared it to how it looks in original Black Flag because there were far fewer altered variables. Because of this you can see it's a graphically improved, albeit lateral step. I would love to know why Edward is looking so devious in these trying times, but as you can see when the lighting system is actually trying to accomplish the same thing in the same scene, the difference is far less egregious. That being said, I can't help but ask why this sunset has been changed for a mid-afternoon shot, because the lower sun makes for a more atmospheric scene here. I suppose I've never thought about it before, but I'd imagine that was a fixed lighting cutscene. After all, in it, Edward and Adewale had just stolen the jackdaw. I don't know. It's been a while since I've properly sat down and played Assassin's Creed 4, so maybe people are getting riled up over nothing. Overall, it still possesses the Black Flag look. It seems mostly right to me. That's got to be worth something. As for some of the gameplay bits, I prefer a minimap to a compass, to be honest. It's not that a compass is bad in every setup. In first-person open-world experiences, it's quite handy, and I get that it's far more minimalistic than a circular minimap in the corner, but minimaps add character to the UI, and I'm conflicted on the UI to be honest. As you can see here in combat, it's quite invasive in the corners anyway. As for the combat overhaul, I will say this about original Black Flag's combat. It was quite pleasant to look at, but at times it could feel a bit tedious to play. The animation-based counter system seems to be gone. The animations are still there, however they're integrated more into a hitbox combat system, where you still have the wealthier arsenal to tap into, and maybe that'll make for a more engaging system, but the parry queue's a bit ridiculous and loud. I don't know why that's so noisy or why it's so visually potent. A more subtle sound and visual cue would absolutely make that look cleaner, but I can respect that they've kept many of Edward's finisher animations. You can see that they're trying to make it a bit more engaging, perhaps even challenging, and who knows, maybe they'll succeed. As I was watching the footage, I kept expecting features from original Black Flag to be absent, but when it comes to the combat, it seems it's in there, albeit reshuffled into something very different. However, with combat in games, often it's not about how it looks, but how it feels to play. As for the parkour, it appears to be very Mirage-esque. I have played Mirage, by the way. I picked it up second-hand some time ago and gave it a bash. If they'd added that Mirage-esque parkour to a remake of Assassin's Creed 2, yeah, I wouldn't be too keen. But Black Flag is the core of the Kenway saga, and the parkour in those games, while it looked fine, wasn't necessarily my favourite system to toy around with. It simply did the job for me. Nevertheless, it was weighty and reliable. If you're going to replace that with a different parkour system, it needs to at least be at the same level. And I'm not exactly filled with optimism over Mirage's parkour system perhaps taking priority over it or being the basis for it. and because it's a Ubisoft Quebec title I can't comment as to what Shadows did, so my Assassin's Creed parkour ball knowledge has admittedly seen better days. For all I know I could be pleasantly surprised, so I'll reserve my judgment. I do wonder how being able to side and back eject and free jump will make it feel. Maybe it'll inject the freedom the system needs, and allow for pacier parkour if you know how to use the system. But again, I can't necessarily comment. As for the stealth, Black Flag Resynced now has a crouch button. Considering how hard it was to get the thing working when they introduced the damn thing in 2014, I think Ubisoft have earned the right to keep that, but I didn't notice any instances of proper Assassin's Creed social stealth. As for the abundance of tailing missions in Assassin's Creed 4, they have emphasised how they've sorted that out. Now failing a tail doesn't automatically fail the mission, though I'd be curious to see what the backup plan is. In the footage they used as an example, Edward just starts killing, and I'm about to give you a nuanced take on Black Flag's tailing missions. Yes, there are a lot of them. Too many of them even. They are tedious. They are painful, particularly when you're doing one after another, but every so often one of them is perhaps necessary. As ridiculous as they were, at least they were part of some mission structure, and it would be a shame to see that go entirely out the window because the player can't be asked. Not that you can necessarily blame the player when you realise just how many tailing missions Assassin's Creed 4 had. It had loads of them. There were even tailing missions on ships. I'm not out to deny people's pain here. I share it. I'm simply saying if a tailing mission is derailed, it needs to go somewhere, and I'd be curious to see in more detail how that's integrated. As for other things to talk about, another idea that I like the sound of is the notion of expanded storytelling. There are elements of Black Flag's story that feel a bit lighter than they deserve to be. So the notion of Darby McDevitt coming back to write new arcs for the likes of Blackbeard and Steed Bonnet to slot into what's already there, not to mention some fleshing out of Edward's wife Caroline, is a great idea. The cast returning, at least to an extent as well, there's real potential for the experience to be meaningfully enhanced. I'll definitely be curious to find out more about that. There's a lot that can be done there, dare I say it's exciting. You've got to remember one of Black Flag's greatest strengths was its narrative, penned by none other than Darby McDevitt, bringing him back to expand upon his work, provided he's doing so willingly and gleefully and not being held at gunpoint in a basement somewhere, should mean the writing will be delivered to a high standard, and hopefully the game's fantastic cast can take it from there. There are also a handful of new crew members which should be interesting to explore. The original Black Flag crew consisted of 2 individuals tops and 30 NPCs, so having new members of the crew with fleshed out stories could be interesting. I don't think it will transform the Jackdaw experience into something akin to the Normandy but in the sea. Sorry for the shit comparison, I've been playing Mass Effect of late obviously, but it could still provide the Jackdaw experience with much needed flavour. So I can respect the marketing for acknowledging weak points in the original experience and declaring there will be attempts to improve those areas. I also hear they're going to be doing more with the underwater spaces. As for the naval, in the end of the day it's Black Flag. I recognise I might be jinxing it when I'm asking how could you possibly mess that up. It seems to function reasonably similarly. The UI is vastly different, and one can only hope it doesn't have the lightweight, impactless feeling of Odyssey's naval combat. But I suppose the Jackdaw's firing cannons, not arrows, so that should, in theory, be expected. It doesn't seem like they've made too many changes in this area on its own, which makes sense. Black Flag had a lot of popularity off the back of the pirate stuff. Naval in Assassin's Creed I could always take or leave, but there was always a satisfaction to boundless plunder. Apparently there are more weapon types to do with the Jackdaw. That should be interesting to see, and apparently you can now have pets. Fair enough. I also like the idea of the open world being seamless. If you recall, the cities typically had their own world spaces that you could get to via a loading screen that was unavoidable. I don't mind the white room loading screens in Assassin's Creed, but if you asked me if I'd prefer to be able to walk in a white room loading screen, or pull into a bustling city port on the Jackdaw, I know which I'd prefer. Apparently there's also going to be some new music too, to slot in with the old stuff, and that includes new sea shanties. That's an easy win, so fair enough. As for the modern day, it seems Ubisoft Singapore plan to do something different entirely with that. I wouldn't say Black Flag's modern day was ever its strongest point. It introduced some new concepts that comic books in particular would rinse at a later date, but by comparison to the Desmond saga that had just ended, it was very stalled. So I wouldn't be surprised if they scrap the outside the Animus stuff altogether. And as much as I loved Assassin's Creed Modern Day for how it brought these historical segments together, at this stage in proceedings, I'm going to be entirely honest with you, I couldn't give a rat's about it. There may still be room for some variety of Animus tomfoolery, but the main thing is refining Edward's story. Supposedly they're going to play around with something tailored to that to fill the gap, and that sounds entirely reasonable. It would seem there are differences galore, both big and small. Furthermore, there are promises of things that a showcase cannot necessarily show. I'd be curious to find out more about them when the time comes, but it sounds like there's an immense attention to detail going on in bringing Black Flag to 2026, and I'm liking a lot of what there is to know right now. So, you get the idea. I may not understand why Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag getting a remake was necessary entirely, but necessity is not a strong argument when it comes to entertainment, particularly when talking about a broader product and not how the product conducts itself. I am genuinely impressed to an extent by what I'm seeing, and I honestly didn't think Ubisoft had it in them. It truly does look like a high-effort remake, even if there are some leftover bits from games that came between Black Flag and Black Flag Resynced. This is the first Ubisoft product I've seen in years marketed where I'm more fascinated by the potential positives than how it might suck a piece of my soul up like a Roomba and roll off down the street. In simple terms, Ubisoft has piqued my curiosity, and I'll definitely be keeping my eye on this one. Let's not get ahead of ourselves and say it's the harbinger of a great mentality shift. If I'm being honest, I worked up such an event in my head as being a harbinger of the end times. It is Ubisoft. There are still countless ways they could theoretically cock it up somehow, but at no point in this presentation did I get that impression. The impression I got was a lot is riding on the success of this Black Flag Resynced. It seems like a do-or-die scenario, but everything that was actually said in the presentation sounded quite positive, particularly the prioritization of striking a balance between not changing Black Flag too much, but changing it in areas where it needed changing. It's far too easy to upscale textures, slap an orange filter and some lens flares on a game, call it a remaster without paying any mind to why it didn't feel especially mastered to begin with, and calling it a day. Ubisoft has done that themselves in the past. It's a lot harder to diligently remake something from the ground up, completely rebuilding the experience, taking what worked and critically overhauling what didn't. I won't sit here and say to you that I'm entirely convinced by every change this remake appears to have made. I'm not sure about the parkour. The combat could go either way. What's the crack with social stealth? Where is it? And if it's not there, what makes Edward bending over superior? I think I recall reading something earlier somewhere about it being present, but can't remember where, sorry. But if it is, I'd love to know why it isn't being shown here. That should be at the heart of any Assassin's Creed title, but that aside, I think what spoke to me the most about the presentation was how sincere the words I was hearing felt. That's not to say they were. Maybe everybody involved in this, including Matt Ryan, lost a bet. But the idea that Ubisoft brought fans in to heavily scrutinize the game, and that included a familiar face or two, you know, people who genuinely care about the franchise and want to see it thrive, gives you the idea they've been doing their diligence. I also like the sentiment that they're keeping the core pillars of the game in mind. And while I do wonder just how prepared the modern Anvil engine is for that, my doubts exist solely to be proven wrong. And these guys who did the showcase said a lot of promising things. They promised fluidity, arguably essential for any Assassin's Creed experience. They claim to have handcrafted every facial expression. Putting my mind at ease, the days of stiff dialogue, awkward cadence, and random hand gestures are either over or will skip this one. I also like the idea that every new addition was treated with caution. I hope that rings true and things weren't thrown in there for the sake of having them. Nevertheless, I also like the idea of expanding, refining, and ultimately transforming Black Flag with new additions that make sense and fit between the chapters in the storytelling, giving the game a different feeling but ultimately still being Black Flag. Striking that balance is a hell of a challenge Ubisoft have set for themselves. How can you take something from 2013 and remake it over a decade later, staying true to a vision born of limitations that have long since lifted, while also exploring the possibilities beyond? That's no easy task for anyone. I also don't recall hearing that forbidden M word that's become ubiquitous with anything Ubisoft in recent memory, so I hope that stays that way. So, for the first time in what feels like far too long, I can't segue into cynicism. If anything, I feel wrong for admitting I kind of like what I'm seeing. I don't think I'm going to be able to resist this one. Shadows didn't draw me in at all, to be honest, so I've never played it. And when I picked up Assassin's Creed Mirage secondhand, I did find it to have some value, even if I wasn't entirely sure what it was trying to say. Here, there's something familiar afoot, and we know there's greatness within it. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag at its best is a great time. So if this takes the very best of that and pushes it further somehow, it might be a rare Ubisoft win. And if they can make this work, maybe they can make other things work down the line too, you never know. But one step at a time, eh? I get the feeling Ubisoft need a success here. Whether or not they'll get one is ultimately up to them. We'll simply find out on or after the 9th of July. I'd love to know your thoughts on it, so be sure to fill me in down in the comment section, but for now I don't have anything else to say, so I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. Would be massively appreciated, but no pressure. And if you fancy getting further stuck into the conversation, maybe tag along to our Discord server via the QR code on screen now. If you can put up with my nonsensical rambling for any length of time, you're more than welcome. But with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. And until next time, please take care and goodbye.